Welcome to the Liberty Collaborative, where the past meets the present in the fight for freedom. We uncover the roots of liberty, spotlight the people who shaped it, and explore what it takes to preserve it today. If you're ready to think deeper, stand stronger, and act with purpose, you're in the right place. Let's reclaim what matters most.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Aaron Bowman. I'm the host of Liberty Collaborative, and I'm here today with the usual suspects. I have K. Carl Smith, the founder of the Frederick Douglass Republican Engagement Method, Mike Hancock, the Undercurrent Substacker, and the one and only Chris Coyle, the founder of Wind Labs. And today I couldn't be more excited about what we're going to be talking about because it is the fourth branch of government. So good morning, fellas. How is everyone?
Hey there.
Doing great.
Pretty good on this end. How you guys doing?
Fantastic.
Well, K. Carl, fired up because this damn fourth branch, anyone who's watching goes, I didn't know we had a fourth branch of government.
Yeah.
We're going to take the gloves off, Aaron, and start slapping this around. This is ridiculous. This is crazy.
Let's get into it. This is great. So, for those that are listening, if you ever want to find us, we're on all the modern podcasting apps, YouTube, and you're going to get stuff here that you're not going to find anywhere else. And we each took a different, we'll call it fourth branch of government. So I'll leave it up to you guys to decide who wants to go first. But I think we should, I think this is going to be a very good topic. And for those that have listened to our previous podcast, I think we're going to go over the half hour today.
Well, Michael, Michael had really described the detail of how this all started and just the context. Maybe that'd be a good historical quick foundation for everybody listening.
Yeah, I think it's good to have us take a look at the administrative state from the perspective of we really, and most people don't have a clue as to one, how it came about and or how it is designed and functions. So as I went back and took a look at some historical stuff, what I discovered was that Woodrow Wilson is the guy that actually took and moved the administrative state from being more of a clerical function to one of being manned by what one might call so-called experts, right? The notion that these experts who are experts know so much expert things that they can tell everybody what to do. And then I think a key point is that when the nation was started, there were some initial departments created by Congress, but I think the subtle nuance that people miss is the fact that those departments, even though initiated by Congress, they're really designed and implemented and managed in the executive branch. And so I think we're all under the mistaken component that these branches are something that are controlled by Congress and actually designed by Congress, and they can't do anything except for what Congress wants them to do. That's just not the case. Congress basically, whether they're created, initiated in Congress or initiated by the executive branch and then approved by Congress, they're actually largely funded and overseen by Congress, but the operational aspect of it, from design to day-to-day activities, is really dictated by the executive branch. And so and then the other key point is that while Woodrow Wilson really sort of changed those departments from being largely clerical, if you will, to being more expert driven, it was FDR that did a massive expansion of the numbers of administrative departments and the extent to which they impact the lives of everyday Americans.
So are you saying, Michael, that in some case that the Congress has sold us out to the fourth branch of government?
Well, what I would say is that really, if you think about it, the idea of however many 500 people in Congress being able to manage a department doesn't actually make any sense, right?
Michael and K. Carl, Aaron, people got to understand, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, But within the establishment of the delegation of authority to create these agencies, they allowed them to become perpetual, like growth machines that they could keep saying, well, we need to regulate more. The EPA, we need to, there's more bad out there, guns, we need, and so they can propagate their own growth with no control, right?
Yeah, absolutely. To K. Carl's point, I think that's the oversight angle, right, and the constraining of what they can actually do. You're right, K. Carl. Congress just let the barn, the mule out of the gate, right?
We know how many states we have, how many House of Representatives, right, based on population, senators, one president, but who controls how big these agencies get? I would submit to you, no one. It's out of control.
No one does, but the executive really is the one that has the power and should be doing it.
And heaven forbid, actually, to reduce the size of an agency, only to what? Be sued and told by courts you can't reduce the size of these agencies.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're never going to see any reduction of any of these administrative arms of the government, especially like I took on the ATF, and you start to see how large of an organization that is and where it started. The history of it going all the way back to 1719 to 1919, the very first view or the first beginnings of the ATF was when they started to tax alcohol back in the 1719 to 1862. And from there, it just continuously grew and it got more. And a lot of it at the time, it was under the Treasury. It wasn't even under any type of law enforcement agency. But like you were saying, Chris, and if you could talk on this before we got on and recorded, how many different agencies have law enforcement powers now? SWAT teams.
Yeah, it's well, I know each of you will touch on it, but over 18 agencies now have authority and resources for law enforcement. So we're talking loadout kits, bulletproof vests, automatic weapons, riot tanks, all the way from Bureau of Land Management to the Postal Service to Fish and Wildlife. Okay, Carl, I think you're going to talk about the EPA, but imagine a fisherman in Louisiana, true story in Gorsuch's book called Overruled. SWAT guys coming and capturing this fisherman because he kept a fish that was too big. So totally out of control in terms of that aspect of the agencies.
Congress needs to recapture its authority, and they let these agencies run amok. And I'm gonna be honest with you, some of these agents, these people embedded and entrenched in these agencies, they're anti-liberty, obviously, and have some Marxist tendencies. That's concerning.
Absolutely.
Very, very concerning. So one other thing I just want to, I guess we'll all kind of just put in our 2 cents on the different agencies we looked at, but I found the history of the ATF and how it got started and how it really started to pick up the enforcement aspect of things is during the Prohibition era. So from the 1920s to 1933, when we see the prohibition of alcohol, and that's when we start to see the enforcement. So the Bureau of Prohibition becomes a distinct entity in justice. And it's very interesting to see how year after year, it's a little bit more, give them an inch, they'll take a mile type thing. And that's kind of what it seems like. And I'm sure you all are seeing that with the different administrative agencies that you've looked at. And it's quite scary when you really sit back and look at it to see how much power some of these organizations have.
Oh, absolutely. One of the, Mark Levin has a new book out. I think it's called On Power or something like that. And one of the things that he says in the book is that our Constitution was designed to constrain power from the power hungry. right? And one of the things that we as citizens have to do is understand that there are really power hungry people out there. But the good thing is, one, that our Constitution allows for there to be the power hungry to be combated by those who respect, and in essence, those that are the bad power people to be challenged by the people that are use power in a really good way. And so we as citizens have to become more aware of that dynamic, and as a result, get more engaged in holding the people that we elect accountable. To your point again, K. Carl, Congress, and making sure that that balance is maintained.
So I want to challenge you guys. Let's set up the other argument. So, Michael, I'm going to tell you that there are harms in this world, and we had to set up resources to address those harms. Global warming, K. Carl, the EPA, pollution, particulates, Aaron wackos running around with machine guns, that where there is a potential harm to the citizenship or an ill, we're going to create an agency. For example, the FBI was created under the Attorney General to enforce federal law, mostly criminal. Well, now it actually is an intelligence organization.
True.
And the decisions that are made in the field are now made in DC. So how do we discuss this balancing what they're supposed to be doing? Or is their premise flawed from the very beginning? Should there be an EPA to begin with?
You know, for me, Chris, I think a lot of it is flawed right from the beginning. So, for example, this horrific shooting that just happened in New York City. The guy bought the gun legally. Obviously, he was unstable, had a grudge against, I think it was the NFL, ended up on the wrong floor of the building, started shooting the wrong people. Now, if everybody, you know, especially in New York, they have some of the strictest gun laws. And we see a lot in the news where people that carry either concealed or open carried off-duty officers, they're the ones usually that stop these kind of responses. And I don't care what kind of law you put on the books, the criminals aren't going to, one, follow those laws. And two, if you have somebody that is mentally unstable, or, you know, I've heard, you know, there's been other reasons why this guy has done this, and you're not going to be able to control the free will of somebody. So we need to have those tools available to protect ourselves, our rights, and our liberties. And if somebody comes in to a school and starts shooting, I think the teachers should be armed, or there should be armed people there to combat that. Because being in law enforcement, the response time, by the time the cops actually get there, I mean, look what happened here with Newtown. It took them a while to get there to finally stop that threat. And a lot of kids' lives were lost. So again, to me, I think a lot of this stuff is they're trying to over-regulate, and no matter what type of regulation they put forth, or laws or statutes, you're not going to be able to stop those that really want to ensue violence, especially when it comes to, you know, the firearms. And then you have that.
Well, and who are they targeting, Aaron? What about this guy in Florida? I think he was a airport director, and he collected firearms. And ATF went to his house at night with warrantless, if I remember the facts, didn't tell him who he was. They were, just started crashing the door, and he shot back and they killed him.
Yeah.
You know, K. Carl, you were talking about the Wyoming farmer who takes care of his own land and builds a pond, and he's being crushed by the federal government. I mean,
it was a small pond on his own property, I guess, so his family can fish in it, like I'm gonna do on my land. And the EPA said he violated the Clean Water Act and fined him $75,000 a day. This is absolutely crazy. And what's crazy, I got this rock growler biting me. I got to take a break. I got to get to the bathroom, man.
Feed your dog, would you?
When nature calls.
Really?
I did feed him, but
So
I'll be
fish
back.
and wildlife.
Go, man. Go. I'm coming. Okay, I'll be back, guys.
All right.
So, guys, one of the things you think about is the force of the government, obviously taxpayer money, using that money, let's call it virtually unlimitless personnel who can come to work and say, my job is to go after Aaron Bowman, go after Michael, Chris Coyle, right? And so you look at the way they have been able to target, and we know how politicized this has become. So you think of, for example, the FBI its original foundation. But as 9/11 happened, they said, hey, we need more of an intelligence arm. So today, the decisions in the FBI, and Kash Patel is now addressing these, have primarily been made in Washington, D.C. by lawyers.
Yeah.
No law enforcement. They're not from the field saying we think we have crimes or issues with this gang stealing intellectual property. But instead, as we know, they were lying to FISA courts. They were politicized. So what do you guys think about, just throw it out as a beginning. The word is, in several agencies, they're breaking it apart and moving it out to the United States to different areas, putting field offices and doing away with the Washington, D.C. office or greatly reducing it.
Yeah, I think the idea of reducing it goes against the nature of institutions, right? Institutions have a tendency to grow bigger and bigger, both in terms of size and in scope, because that's the way they preserve their existence. So that's somewhat of a natural thing. I think breaking it up, also reducing the scopes of those organizations has to be done too, and then moving them out into the communities where the actual issues are closer. Yeah. That makes perfect sense. And one of the things I was going to say is that accompanying all of this is the fact that you have these things like global warming, right? All of these issues that come up where there all of a sudden magically becomes some global solution that basically is going to be forced down everyone's throats. Those are the things that we have to be very, very conscious of and fight against, because those are using issues as vehicles for actually limiting the liberty of human beings.
Interesting. The appropriate role of government, Aaron, a classic debate. Many would argue the government will create economic conditions and frameworks to stimulate innovation and commerce. But when they step in with regulations and in effect choose winners and losers, or through their tax or regulatory function, effectively stop commerce from occurring. When's the last time California has put in a dam to address their water issues? So Michael, what you're saying is sort of these supposed harms have then metastasized into agencies almost directing the commercial free enterprise response to those harms.
Oh, absolutely. And so in the case that you just talked about in California, well, the people in that area that is being affected should be the people driving what those solutions are, not the state, not the federal government, right? So my view is that the more local you have the solutions, then the more practical and the more liberty-minded they will be.
And to frame this, Aaron, let me just give a local example. We live in Connecticut. We have the highest cost of energy in the continental United States. So let's unpack this for a minute. EPA and others said global warming is an existential threat. It is going to ruin mankind. And let's put aside the scientific debate of how true that is. So I think most people would agree 5 acres of Walmart rooftops and parking lots probably is releasing more heat than a field, right? So we don't get it, but let's just take that premise. They then go and say, therefore, you will or will not do these things. And so our local rep, Joe Courtney, who acts like he's an independent, signs off on all these bills. Then our state, Connecticut, says we're going to follow the federal guidance, and we're going to sort of mandate that in a few years you can't have a combustion engine. But here's the best part. What they did, and this comes from this, they said, I know, we're going to put this surcharge on your electric bill. This started right, Aaron, last summer.
Yeah, it did.
That gave us the highest energy cost in the country. In some cases, their electric bill went up $200. You know what it's for? It's really a tax that goes into a fund for windmills, for electric cars. Now, no one has determined the true carbon impact of building these gigantic windmills, putting them out there, the oil and hydraulic fluid that's falling from, and then when they fall apart, burn down, or freeze, like happened in Texas, no one has ever done a balance sheet to say, is this solution right? They've mandated it.
Absolutely.
And so today in Connecticut, we have the highest electric costs thanks to this.
See, Chris, and I thought that public benefits charge was to get the Epstein files released. So
that's funny. Well,
it was so expensive they turned off the lights in the jail, and miraculously, when they turned him on, he was dead.
Yeah. I mean, and one of the things that you're pointing out is they collect this money from us, taxes, fees, surcharges, or whatever, and that are supposed to be used for one thing. But then what ends up happening is that they're used for something quite different. Here in Colorado, in fact, I'm on a ballot initiative dealing with the fact that the money that we collect for gases, taxes, and stuff like that are supposed to be used for highways and maintaining our highways and constructing our highways, that money is actually used to do that. Well, and rather than doing that, what we have that money being used for is creating bike lanes, right? Well, along I-70, you have giant potholes that, people are losing their cars in. So it's absolutely crazy.
it is.
For me, the key word is consent. And I get whenever I got to go back and talk about Douglas with this, because Douglas actually, he didn't write about the fourth branch of government. It wasn't a problem then, but he talked about in his writing his whole idea of consent. So now we have government, these bureaucrats entrenched in these agencies who are doing things, governing us, not being accountable to us, and they're doing things without our consent.
Right.
And the EPA is a perfect example. And not only the EPA, I go with the Department of Education. And I'm glad what Trump is doing to get rid of the Department of Education, because they are infused by Marxists who push an agenda on us we never agreed to.
Okay, Carl, whose right is it to educate kids? It's an individual right, a state right.
It's individual right, state right. It's local.
No authority at all.
We don't need a bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. telling our children what to think and what to reject. That's what the parents and the local government has nothing to do with these bureaucrats up there who always have a Marxist agenda tied to funding.
They tax everyone in the country, goes through the Department of Education, and they dictate down to those same schools, here's what you're going to do if you get your money. And we go, but wasn't it our money to begin with? You took it, redistributed it, and now you're threatening if we don't do, which in the prior administration, if you don't let boys compete with girls, we're going to cut the money off.
And so what they're thinking of these bureaucrats, they think they know how to run our lives better than we know how to run our own lives. And that is a mindset of a slave master. I want the listening audience to do some homework here. I encourage you, go to Amazon and get this book entitled The Columbian Orator. The Columbian Orator was a book that at the age of 12 that Frederick Douglass, I think he paid like 50 cents for it. And this book has some of the greatest writing and speeches about liberty, fighting tyranny, and how to persuade someone without using violence to embrace the aspects of liberty. So Douglass bought this book at the age of 12, and that really shaped his worldview. In particular, in the book, there's a dialogue that took place, this imaginable dialogue that took place between a slave and a slave master, where the slave argued like a lawyer, Chris, to the slave master why he should be free. Based on what? Based on clear moral grounds, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the conversation, the slave master freed him. And that right there motivated, inspired Douglass so much. When you read that dialogue that took place between the slave master and the slave, it's almost like you're reading Douglass's words later on in life. Yeah. The aspects of liberty. Yeah. Very powerful.
Yeah,
and bottom line is, the slave said to the slave master, you may have the law in your favor to enslave me, but you never had my consent. That's the point. Check that dialogue out. The Columbian Orator.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, Aaron, for the listeners to understand the scope of this, there are agencies that make laws, the force of law, even though we thought Congress is supposed to do that. The agencies do, but it's called a regulation. But as a force of law, they can bring you into court. Well, guess whose court it is? It's theirs.
Yeah.
So they're the prosecutor. They're the judge. Guess who's the jury? I'm sure you got the answer. Them.
Right.
Yep.
And then they can arrest you, fine you, take your stuff. And everyone's going, holy cow, where did this come from? The Constitution doesn't mention any of this. K. Carl, to your point, it is the heaviest hand of government we know, where they're acting in all these roles simultaneously and asking for more budget to get bigger. Michael, to your point.
Exactly. And that's the scary thing. Actually, most people don't know anything about that arrangement, right? Most people don't have a clue. I think it's only going to be through shows like ours, and us talking about it and spreading the word that people begin to get a sense of how really messed up things have gotten. And I think it's incumbent upon us to the citizens, to start to do things to hold these people accountable and to reel some of this stuff in.
So there was just a story about a father from LA who was in Utah and went to a preserve farm, and there was a petting area where he got to pet the animals, ride on a horse. He says amazing. And at one point, one of the kids ran in a chicken coop, a real chicken coop, and a board had come down, and he got a little cut on his head, and they fixed, and the guy went in, got a nail gun, boom, fixed it. He then said he went to the LA Zoo, and they charged him like $80 to get in. Hamburgers were $35. He said these big exhibits, we are now closing the petting zoo because these animals around. The elephant, they're gone. They gave the elephants to a zoo in Oklahoma. He said to get something fixed, there's memos and approvals, and it goes. And he contrasted how out of control bureaucracy is in agencies. It gets to state level. And here in outside Salt Lake, they just went and did common sense thing. They fixed it. And the parents said, wonderful. We realize you're running in a wood chicken coop. A kid might get hurt. In LA, they'd have their Hollywood lawyers, K. Carl, suing them for everything they're worth and going on some talk show, how they were assaulted by the chicken coop.
Yeah, you guys are making some great points. And as I was looking at stuff with the ATF, under the last administration, you had the ATF making rules, bypassing Congress basically and saying, well, this is a ghost gun, this is illegal, regulations, pistol braces, redefining what a firearm receiver is. And the scary thing for me is they're doing this without going through Congress. And I think some of this stuff definitely is an infringement on somebody's Second Amendment right.
Oh, yeah. The scariest thing about this to me, they answer to no one.
No one.
But yet they rule over millions without our consent.
Well said.
I mean, look at
That's
the IRS.
The problem.
You're right, K. Carl. You get the IRS. Let's say you get behind your taxes. Now you have the IRS enforcement agency coming after you. They're armed, and then they're bringing you into the IRS court. And like you were saying, Chris, you're fighting.
And the postal inspector. Don't forget the postal inspector.
Yeah.
Got to get that badge and gun too.
It's just
hey guys, just a second now. I'm telling you, you're talking about these agencies. We might want to be careful about that.
Yeah, that's right. They'll be. Hang on, there's someone at my door.
Wait. Well, you gotta understand, I'm no longer on the IRS mailing list. I'm so optimistic. I'm like Chris when he goes fish, he takes tartar sauce. I call the IRS, so them, hey, look, take me off your mailing list.
Yeah.
I'm that optimistic.
Guys, here's what's interesting, K. Carl. You talk about individual liberty and freedom. I would submit to you that there is a core foundational assumption, all these agencies, not that you're innocent until proven guilty, but you're likely violating some law or rule. And if you're not, we'll create one next year and then come back. Right? So the IRS doesn't assume you're good. They assume you're hiding something and they're going to find it. Right? All these same thing, Aaron.
But Chris, they get you on a technicality. And I know what I'm talking about here.
Right.
I send my tax returns to 3 different attorneys, 3 different accounts. I get 3 different numbers.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, just create enough for laws that no one can figure it out.
Yes, boy.
Right. I'll give you a great example of this is, Aaron, the Second Amendment. So we often say to people, Do you believe in the Bill of Rights? All the right. Oh, yeah. Well, do you like one better than the other? Well, I love the First Amendment, but that Second Amendment, sorry, you can't choose. They're all of the same cloth. They are applied individually, in groups, and so forth. Well, the Second Amendment says you have this right. ATF, I believe, and a lot of folks go, well, not really. We're going to sort of say you don't really have the right to do this, and we're going to find a way around that right. As you know, the Supreme Court's finally clawing them back, but it's a slow journey.
Yeah, it is. We're having a little technical difficulty with Mike. I'm looking for his number. He needs to reconnect his mic. That's why he got booted. If somebody can send him a quick text, just let him know. I'm looking for his number right now.
I will handle it.
All right. Got it. Thanks. So, yeah, it is really scary when you start thinking about it. But I guess from the other side of the coin, I guess people say, listen, if we don't have the IRS, well, how are we going to pay for things in the government? How is the government gonna work? And we need to have IRS. We need to have income tax. We need all these things. We need to hire 98,000 more IRS agents like they were trying to do. And when you talk to some of the people on the other side of the coin, they do have somewhat of a good argument, I guess, based on their framing of it. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's necessary to the extent that it's at. Like you were saying, K. Carl, you get three different figures as far as what you owe the IRS. The IRS never sends you a letter at tax season and says, hey, you've made this much money. You owe us this much in taxes, and I think, the tariffs, and I would love to see just a flat tax. And I think that would make things a lot easier for most people, because doing your taxes, even with like TurboTax, it can get very, very confusing on what's owed and what's not.
They need to go to a consumption tax. I'm a big component of the fair tax.
Yeah. Yep. I agree.
That'll solve a lot of problems.
It would, and I think, I don't think we're ever going to see it in our lifetime, Chris or K. Carl and Mike, if you can still hear us, hopefully he can get his mic fixed, that we're ever going to see any reduction in the bureaucracy that goes on. You have the bureaucracy, the fourth branch of government, there's Mike. And then you have all the lobbyists that are lobbying to get these fourth branches to get. Well,
Aaron, Trump, I would argue with you guys, Trump is on his way. And as we know, K. Carl, we talk about Michael really guided us. Personality politics will not save this country, but you look at the strength of this guy named Donald Trump, who came in and said, you know what, we've got to cut, like Department of Education, cut it. And what I laugh at and find just amazing is the raw claim that people can sue the administration saying, you can't take away this aid. We're entitled to this, you're entitled to that, as if these agencies now are the bedrock of our country. So, Aaron, to your point, there's a fight going on, but you got to give Trump credit. They're at least starting the road toward reducing, distributing, reorganizing these agencies, at least in the right direction.
And we can give them that credit right after this commercial break.
The Frederick Douglass Republican strategy unites us, connecting across race and party through life, liberty, and truth. Speak with moral authority, not pandering. Lead with liberty, and people follow. Discover the movement in K. Carl's bold new book, Telling Conservatives the Truth, at kcarlink.com.
Okay.
All right. And we are back.
And now,
I was going to say, Chris, I was going to dovetail to your comment there. And you're right, because Trump is doing something that I like, and that is to downsize some of these agencies or to get rid of them altogether. And that's the first step. Yeah. And I want to share a quote from Frederick Douglass. You talk about what we're dealing with. We talk about the agency that have power. And Doug said on one occasion, he said, power concedes nothing without a demand.
Yep.
So and we got to understand as American citizens, we actually have the power. We got to get it back. The power is not with the bureaucrats. That's not how the founders established this country in our form of government. The power is with us, but we got to become legislatively involved in the process and demand that Congress get its authority back, its congressional authority, and demand at the ballot box by stop advocating and start agitating and get this power back and elect good people who's going to stand by the people.
Okay, Carl, so let's take that. How do we square that with what's going on? So get this. A couple months ago, we talked about the No Kings protest. So a king is authoritarian, right? Monarch. There's no representation. Well, aren't we talking about the equivalent of kings, monarchs? These agencies accountable to no one. They can ruin lives. And yet the left seems to like some of them, or I guess all of them, because it's an authoritative way to take control. How did we reconcile that? No kings, but these monarchs we call agencies can act like kings.
Well,
they act like kings.
Yeah, they do. They do.
Yeah.
One of the things that you point out, they use the no kings things, being totally aware of the fact that the vast majority of our citizens are ignorant about the Constitution and the framework under which we all live on a day-to-day basis. I remember when I went to school, I took civics, but the problem that, in reflection that I discovered about taking civics was that we talked about the structure of government, but I don't think we ever really talked about the fundamental principles behind that structure. And I think that's one of the big missing pieces that we're going to have to figure out how to overcome. How do we get our citizens educated about how great this government is that has been established by our founders?
I think the answer to that, Americans must be introduced to the liberty message of Frederick Douglass, because he withstands all the left-wing attacks. Yeah. So when you read what Douglass said about the problem of not having my consent, but you want to enslave me, it makes sense to you, and it helps you to better argue and articulate what you believe in. And the other thing is, look, we live under a rule of unelected officials, those we never chose, and whose power lacks our consent. So what we have now, we have slavery disguised as government. That's the problem. People can't see that. They're blind to that. Yeah. It's slavery disguised as government. Start reading Frederick Douglass, understand by consent why it's so important, and things start becoming clear to you, because the techniques of oppression used by the slave master are identical to the techniques of oppression used by the slave government. And the first thing they take away, they ignore, they don't care about your consent. That's the problem.
Well, or you're right. There. It's a powerful word, Michael and Aaron, that Kate Carl used the word oppression. But again, I highly recommend the book Overruled by Justice Gorsuch. And one of the things he talks about in the book is the federal law enforcement prosecution, their tendency to overcharge. So you talk about oppression. They'll come in, K. Carl, and let's take the January 6th defendants. They had clearly violated some laws. We know that. But when they charge them with fraud, huge federal crimes that ultimately got thrown out by the Supreme Court, they're so terrified. Their lawyer bills are so expensive. Many of them have no choice but to cop a plea. And Gorsuch talks about how the prosecutors will overcharge. And I actually have a client who's got a client case we're working on that was accused, right, in indictments and charged with all these things. And they literally are guilty before they even get to court. So the ability of our law enforcement today to charge people and then say, good luck, Kate Carl, paying for all your lawyers. A lot easier for you to cop a plea or say something bad about the guy we really want. So our law enforcement has really become sort of turned into Frankenstein, and their ability to find anything, get you tangled up, and then force you to cop a plea.
Well, Chris, it's funny you bring up January 6th, because as we're talking, I'm perusing what's on the news and seeing what's happening. And so this is just a public service announcement for some of our listeners. If you watch The View, if you watch MSNBC, you might want to shelter in place for this one. But apparently, the January 6th conspiracy theorist, Joe Kent, who was a former Green Beret, has just been confirmed to lead the National Counterterrorism Center. So I find that interesting. I'm gonna have to read more into this, but the Green Berets are no joke, and if they're gonna put him in charge of the Counterterrorist Center, again, another probably fourth branch of government, but
Aaron, just for the record, I think I'm speaking for all of us, but I just want to be clear. I don't think any of us would ever have recommended doing anything, getting even near the mall on January 6th.
No.
That was stupid. I'm sorry, that was stupid. And the people who did that, we saw the films. We know that they were encouraged, but it was stupid. And those that violated the law should be held accountable to the full force of the law.
Absolutely.
Where I think we all, as constitutionalists, draw the line is when it turns out a ton of FBI informants were inside the crowd and urging them on. When you cross the line and you're enticing, you're urging people to commit crimes. So I don't think we agree with that. The pipe bomb,
right?
All this stuff. But I think we got to be clear: in no way, shape, or form do I support any of those activities on January 6th. But it's pretty clear there's another side to the story, which could be entrapment, could be a federal conspiracy. Remember, I don't want to get us off track,
right?
But Pelosi refused to call the National Guard. So, but we don't support people charging into federal buildings. So you've got to have respect for those institutions.
Yep, absolutely, 100%. And this, I'll look into this more, but I can't wait to see what the other side's going to say. I got to say, Trump's making some interesting choices as far as who he's putting in positions. I mean, the guy seems to be pretty smart, but again, this is going to set off the other side probably. So,
they're set off, man. They're spinning out of crazy right now. They're spinning, man. They're going nuts. They got to circle the wagons now and get inside the think tank and to figure out how they're going to spin this.
Well, and Kate, Carl, Michael, Aaron, think how crazy this is. We have agencies that we now know are paying off pharma companies, and pharma companies are hiring and paying them. They're creating intellectual property, licensing the pharma companies. And so what is it? Cheerios or a particular product in Canada has.
Hey, Kyle, go ahead and get up. We got to take Maine to the
3 ingredients, and we have 20. So when it comes to our own health, right, our agencies are out of control.
I apologize.
That's okay. I just muted you real quick. Yeah, you're right. Go ahead, Kay Carl.
One thing about this, we're going to be raw and real. No, we're human beings here.
Yeah.
You're not going to get anything edited and cut out. Nope. If I mess up, I'm going to mess up, and I take responsibility.
Between Kyle and the Rottweiler, Kay Carl's got control of his household.
So, but Chris, to your point, the agencies are out of control. You talked about the funding of the farmers, but the whole funding driven to NGOs from the agencies as well, right? Yeah. And in particular, NGOs that are actually engaged in efforts that are literally anti-American. So there's so much corruption that's there that needs to be rooted out. I'm not sure that even in Trump's term, this time he'll be able to root out everything, but there's got to be a commitment on the part of whoever is in that leadership branch of actually getting rid of that. And there's got to be a commitment from our side, right, to hold them accountable for doing that.
Well, to your point, maybe we go around the horn here with solutions. So if you look at what Kash Patel is proposing for the FBI is to, and these aren't in perfect order, but distribute the agency out to the corners of America because they're supposed to be there guarding us, right? Second, really look at the role the FBI has as intelligence. We already have an intelligence branch, and this whole intelligence thing, and get it, there's cyber crime and the use of digital for crimes, but that seems to be really sorted out to get decision-making out of Washington, D.C., depoliticize it. And finally, guys, I'll throw it to you, hold people accountable. I would submit to you that the most urgent and dangerous power of the federal but state government is that badge. And if you have someone abuse that power, as we're now seeing they did, I think America demands that they're held accountable. That when you're given the trust of a badge, it's at a different level. It's one thing if you're given a plaque that you're a voted senator or congressman, but when you're given a badge and you can lie to a FISA court, by the way, that FISA court judge, one of them, turns out he's that guy Boasberg.
Yeah.
Did you guys see that? Funny thing. Anyway, that's my take on the FBI is decentralize it, reorganize it so cases have to come up the field, and get it out of the intelligence business, or limit its ability to be an intelligence only as it relates to the violation of federal law.
Yeah, you're right, Chris. And I know that, the ATF now is under the Department of Justice. It was moved there, I think, in 2002, after 9/11. But you're right. When you look at these administrative agencies, we had the siege on Waco, where all those 76 people lost their lives, and it was a huge debacle by the ATF. And then you have, let's not forget, Fast and Furious and the smuggling of guns, and then those guns to the cartel were used to kill border agents. And again, who was held accountable for any of this? Nobody. So
I think that. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say. So I don't know if I have an answer, but I am one of those individuals who believe sometimes less is more. And why do we have to have the ATF enforcing stuff that maybe the judicial or the marshals could do, or something on those lines? Like, I think there's too much overlap with all these different administrative branches of government.
Aaron, do they review what they're going to do beforehand? So follow this logic. People go to court and say what the ATF is doing is unconstitutional. And after years, the court says, yes, you're right. Is anyone going, wait, guys, before you go out and start knocking on doors, let's review. They certainly are reviewing Trump's executive orders for constitutionality.
Right.
I think the solution is, Aaron, you mentioned it. Less is more. But how we have less, we have to defund them or get rid of them entirely. So once you start defunding this administrative state, we're going to see a difference. The other part is, though, we as American citizens, I think Chris mentioned this, we got to understand what our rights are. Yes. And that this government is based on the power of the people, not the power of the bureaucrats. And once we understand that, because we're not going to learn it in civics class, you're going to get it from shows like this, actually. Yeah, but then you got to get out there and understand how to have conversation with people, not confrontations, in order to get them to have an understanding how our nation is different and how the bureaucrats are accountable to us, not us being accountable to them, and doing things without our consent is a big problem. That's why I'm knocking on wood again. You got to get into the writings of Frederick Douglass, because that helped me to understand the nature of oppression and slavery. And what's happened to us with the fourth branch of government is a form of administrative tyranny.
Yeah, it is. And you need to get involved even at the local level. That's where the change is going to start happening. I know you hear a bunch of different podcasters talking about that, but you need to get out there, and having that Frederick Douglass message is a way to ignite that fire, to get you out there, to be able to articulate certain things and to be able to have those conversations. For example, last Saturday, I helped Chris put on a training session. We had probably about 12 people there, and one of the guys in the class, when we were going through messaging and how to handle tough questions, was like, boy, if I had this a week ago, I could have totally avoided this confrontation and probably had a better conversation with another Republican than I currently had, and ended up getting thrown out of his house, basically, if I remember how the story goes. So it is important to get out there, to engage your RTCs, to have these conversations, to go to different meetings and groups and say, hey, listen, what can we do here? And until that happens and people wake up, like you said, K. Carl, it's going to be the wash, rinse, and repeat. And the government's going to keep growing. These agencies are going to keep growing. And little by little, we're going to wake up one day and not have any liberties left.
Yeah. And the key thing is, as you're saying, Aaron, local. You got to be focused on what's going on local, because of the fact that the moment that you think that you're fixing everything at the federal level, the guys at the state level are going crazy. That's one of the things I look at here in Colorado.
And local level going crazy.
Yeah.
Aaron, regulatory overreach does not have any boundaries, and it doesn't care about what party you are. Their job, they want to find more things to regulate so they can make more money and have more to do. I've been fighting the Inlands, Wetlands, and Watercourses Commission here in my town that asserted jurisdiction over a historic agricultural pond. The law is very clear. It's non-regulated, but they don't see that word. They want to tell you, well, that it means this and that. They don't have the right to do that. So I'm pushing back.
Well, wouldn't that fall into the right to farm? I mean, we're a right to farm state, so.
Well, there's a section in this particular regulation. Most of you listening in your state, you've got something similar that says that if it is under 3 acres in agriculture, it's non-regulated / use by right. Mm-hmm. It doesn't say regulate a little bit. It says none. But they want to reach in, and this was the best thing in my case, have me pay a $500 surety so I could pay for their inspections. Let me get this right. You're going to inspect my work on my pond that I have to clean out because it's filled to get fresh water again and to stop runoff into the local brook. Crazy. And when I push back, people start to go, yeah, you do have a good point. So people have to push back even at the local level.
That's what you did, Chris. That's what more Americans need to do, because we got to figure out what kind of person are we, or are you personally? Are you kind of person that sit back and you make things happen like Chris did? Do you watch things happen? Do you sit back and say, "Oh, what in the hell happened?" Because you didn't do anything, and now look what we have.
Yeah,
make things happen. That's how we make a difference.
A theme for all of us is we're about liberty collaborative, which is. Values unite, issues divide, and people can have reasonable differences. But at the end of the day, whether you're listening to this, you're unaffiliated, you're a Democrat, you're even liberal, you're far right, you're all the same in terms of you have these freedoms. The default state should be your personal liberty. And when government intrudes, it's for an important interest in government, not sort of the whim of some legislator or worse, regulator who's not been voted in by anybody or has any checks and balances. They have none. There's no checks or balances.
I agree, and I have a little note here that says government must be limited to protect liberty. Any agency that bypasses the will of the people undermines self-government. And we really need to get more back to that self-governing and that consent like we've talked about today. But fellows, we've got about 9 minutes before we hit an hour. This went long today. It was great, fantastic conversation. I hope everybody enjoyed it. So I think if you guys are all willing, we'll just wrap up with some closing comments, and that'll be the show for today.
Let me start off first, because I got to check out of here right quick. And that is, become a better message of liberty. Don't sit back and ride this thing out and let somebody else take care of it. Do something, get involved at the local level and work it from there. And even when I say the local level, start at your dinner table. That's local level. You branch from there, because I'm sure in your family, you got some child or grandchild or aunt, somebody that's been indoctrinated to Marxism. But the way you turn them around and turn our nation around, I encourage you to leverage the liberty message of Frederick Douglass, because most folks who've been indoctrinated to Marxism have never heard of Douglass' liberty message. And when they hear it's a game changer. Because how can you argue with a runaway slave about his love for liberty, his respect for the U.S. Constitution? The left has no answer for Frederick Douglass. They never will. And guys, I got to get out of here. I got to take my son to an appointment.
All right.
See you, K. Carl.
Cheers.
All right, Chris.
I'll just cap by saying this. For people watching, we've been warming up over the last month or so. Zeroing in on the branches, or the quote constitutional crisis, the brawl of the branches. But we've got, Aaron, some amazing stuff coming ahead. We're going to get into name, image, and likeness, for example, and its tension with individual liberty versus how do you run a college football team. And we've got a ton of stuff. I hope in your close, just let listeners know some of the neat shows we have coming up.
Yeah, and what I'd say is going back a little bit to what K. Carl was saying is that it definitely starts local, and that one of the things that has opened my eyes so much over the last 3 years is just really getting into understanding the Constitution, understanding the Declaration of Independence and what it really says, right? Understanding capitalism and what it really is versus what the leftists will put out in the world as to what they think it is, which has nothing to do with the reality. Although what they're saying it is actually growing more towards it, because that's the way that they're influencing it. So I encourage everybody to just dig in, and it's fun to actually learn what the heck our founders created, because it's a powerful model. It's a model that is built around the idea of growing better and better and better the more we understand it and the more we engage in it.
Absolutely well said, guys. And, in my closing thoughts, I will just say the same thing as a lot of you have said, that you need to get involved at the local level. You need to start somewhere to get off the sidelines. That's what got me into this over a year ago. You can go to protests, you can go to rallies, you can, go to the Capitol and protest something that's happening with homeschooling or the way they're trying to regulate something. But at the end of the day, the change comes from within when you start getting involved and you start participating. So, Chris, I was trying to pull up the list of upcoming shows, and for some reason, I cannot pull it up on my computer.
Well,
right now.
we invite anyone listening, any side of the aisle you're on, to call and engage with us. We think meaningful, respectful debate. Love to hear from some folks calling in. But as you know, our focus is content and context that generally is omitted from the main media narrative and historical perspective.
Absolutely.
Which comes back to it.
Yep. Absolutely. And also email us if there's topics that you'd like to hear us talk about. Email us and let us know. We love digging into this stuff.
Yep. You can find us on libertycollaborative.substack.com or email us at libertycollaborative1818@gmail.com if you have any questions or comments for the show. I think eventually we'll start doing these shows live, so we'll be able to interact automatically with the chats on YouTube and other spots. But I think that's
and play that outtake music that Michael did. That's so good.
Here we go, guys. Until next time, we'll see you.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on the Liberty Collaborative. If today's episode lit a fire or gave you clarity, share it and become part of the movement. Subscribe, leave a review, and keep the conversation going. Until next time, stand firm, stay free.